I'm Steve Farina, 87 Railroad. I've got a number of questions, and I've got some more that I'm sure that I'll want to follow up with later. But the first question was that I tried to ask as you were presenting. It sounds like you have absolutely no quantitative numbers for how many water bottles are being used in Great Barrington, yet somehow you think that there's a ban that should be in place to limit the number that you don't know what it is that you're going to try and measure.
Yeah.
So the ban was voted on at the town meeting.
I know I wasn't allowed to talk at that.
You're allowed to talk here, but what I'm saying is that's not for discussion tonight. The citizens have given us the direction and we're enforcing that.
Is this we that he's talking about, is this we that you're talking about collectively the town?
The town meeting
So-
approved this bylaw.
Town meeting,
Right.
yes.
Okay,
That's a legislative body.
so a couple of things. We have not had China or any of these countries ban our recyclables. They've stopped taking our trash. That's a huge thing. That's a false statement up on there. The law goes into effect in May, not January. But I do find it troubling that you've got all this cost added. I'm assuming it's cost added. Marketing that you have to do to promote this ban, and I take it that comes from taxpayer expense?
It will.
It will? And so none of this was brought out ahead of time prior to the vote, as well as many of the other costs that are going to be associated with it. I think tonight we'll hear about water filling stations, the numbers that were presented at the town meeting that I wasn't allowed to speak at, was that somebody came up with the number that there were 1 million water bottles used in Great Barrington every year. Concord has 4,000. So somewhere in here there's some disconnect.
Yeah. And I would say this just so and I'm not interrupting, I'll let you continue to speak. As far as the filling stations are concerned, that's, there's no budget for that. There's no, if we were to ask the town for money for that, that would be at the next town meeting. And as far as I'm concerned,
you are the town. Who is we?
We, as a select board, would ask at the next town meeting.
Okay.
It would be part of the budget, but as far as I'm concerned, I think what you're saying is that when this was approved, it was going to be private funds used for the filling stations.
Well,
and as far as I know, that
it also wasn't addressed who was going to maintain them, how they were going to be installed to actually install, who was going to pay to install them, how they were going to be drained. None of that was also addressed. Right. So now I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Along the lines of what we're doing here tonight, because I believe that the bylaw states that the town manager is the one to set the policy for the ongoing enforcement. So I imagine this is what we're talking about and why.
Yes.
However, I don't believe that any of that was supposed to be passed off to the select board unless there was a finding that by the town manager that there was an increase, that it was going to not be cost effective and therefore it was going to cost too much to do this. And that's when it gets passed off to the select board. So with that statement, I'd like to take the 1 million water bottles that were presented at the town meeting, and the group that put that forth also presented that the water bottles were $1 a piece. So the cost to the town is at least $1 million revenue in retail sales. Water bottles tend to be marked up between 35 and 50 cents per bottle at the retail level, which means that you're taking $350,000 to $500,000 of profit from small businesses.
What are your questions?
Please, let me run the meeting, John.
So we're taking $350,000 to $500,000 of profit from the small businesses in this community. If you were to take, let's go with a great number, $15 an hour, you're looking at between 12 and maybe 16 jobs that you're removing from the community just to institute this ban.
So let me just say this, and I let you go on because I know you didn't get to speak at the town meeting, and that is all past us now, unless another town meeting.
Is that the cost that this board and the town manager are willing to accept as a valid cost to implement this? The cost of 12 to 16 jobs or more, that's at $15 an hour, to this town, and $1 million of retail revenue. Is that a cost that's willing to be covered by this ban?
I'm not going to debate.
That you're going to, no, I'm asking.
No, I'm not going to debate your figures. Let me finish.
Okay.
Well, yes, we've been directed by the town meeting, the town manager and the select board, to implement this ban, and that's what we're doing.
And to determine whether the cost, what justifies the ban. So what I'm asking you right now is to stand up and say, yes, the cost of 12 jobs to 16 jobs in the town of Great Barrington justifies the ban of water bottles that don't even make it to the Pacific Ocean. If you read the National Geographic article that was waved around.
Right, I'm not gonna debate,
So,
we're not gonna debate that now.
right, so
Yeah.
right.
We're not gonna debate any of that now.
So my question is, are you willing to say that the cost of 12 to 16 jobs justifies
I
this
first
ban?
of all don't agree with your numbers, and I'm not
I
here.
use their numbers.
Okay, I'm not here to debate it now. We're here to implement the ban.
You're here to determine policy.
Yes,
That's what we're talking about.
and implementing the ban.
And implementing the ban.
Yeah.
Part of the ban
Okay.
that needs to be implemented is the determination of whether it's cost effective. And if it costs too much, then the ban should be brought before public hearings to talk about and see whether the select board continues to allow it to go in force or not. So what I'm asking is
You
the
asked, and
cost?
we're not answering
You're
it.
not answering, why not?
Eileen,
The agenda says discussion of regulations and
yes,
enforcement.
we're getting to that. We haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay, but that is going to.
We're gonna talk about when we're gonna enforce it. Please come up to the microphone if you have something.
I'm not gonna answer that.
Laura Kiefner, 7 Reed
Yes.
Street. Okay, I have just a couple questions. I don't know who Jennifer is.
Excuse me. Who you are?
Okay, you've been
I don't
emailing me
need
back and
my
forth.
actions justify-
First, I asked Jennifer about a water station in Housatonic, and her exact words at that time were, Housatonic is off the table because of their problems with their water company. So I kind of feel that Housatonic is getting screwed on this deal.
Can I answer that for you? The select board nor the town manager have made that. The decision will be up. If my mind, if there's no water station in Housatonic, I won't vote for this.
I hope not.
So I don't know about the rest of the select board, but that's how I feel.
Housatonic is a part of Great Barrington,
Yes.
and they pay their taxes,
Yeah.
and they deserve it just as much
Yeah.
as anybody else. Second, the question, I used to work for the fire district.
Yes.
The fire district takes care of the fire hydrants in town, which they in turn bill the town for. I forget how many fire hydrants there are. So I was told that these new water stations are going to be maintained by the town, installed by the fire district, and whatever else goes with it. I'd like to know how much that cost is gonna be. That obviously gets added to the taxpayer's bill, okay? How much are we gonna be paying for that? How much is it the same amount as we're paying for a fire hydrant? I was also told that the one water station that's gonna go downstairs here has been paid for by somebody. The one up they want in Mason Library is not fully funded yet. I was under the impression that they had all this all lined up, that we had grants and this, that, and the other thing, and now they're looking for donations and everything.
So,
It's
well,
only-
let me just answer one at a time. Again, I can't speak for the select board, but from my point of view, until all the water stations are in, there's an agreement how they're gonna be paid for and how they're gonna be maintained, we won't enforce the ban.
I pay for my water that goes through my faucet. Who's gonna pay for the
That's
water
what I'm
that?
saying, until all that is decided, the
Okay.
ban won't be enforced.
That's my question, is why did we vote on this last year when none of this was put in place? None of it was finalized, nothing. It should have been presented to the town as a final plan, as this is how many we're gonna have, this is where they're gonna go, this is how much money it's gonna cost us, and it's all been done piecemeal. And as far, I just don't understand why you chose a water bottle, and you can still walk into a store and get an energy drink, and you can get flavored water and sparkling water. I just don't understand why the water bottle was chosen, and why all of this stuff wasn't all lined up and presented in, I don't know.
I
And
understand though. Do you have any questions? I understand.
I'm just baffled by the whole thing. I still wanna know who's gonna pay for them, who's gonna pay for
There's
the
gonna be no
upkeep.
enforcement until that comes along.
So, if these are not gonna be installed by May 1st, we know that.
So
There is-
the board has to vote on that. My one vote out of 5 will be there'll be no enforcement until everything is installed and there's agreements who's gonna pay for it.
Okay.
That's part of what we're doing here tonight. is
That's why.
getting answers to
Yeah,
that.
that's why. So,
Okay.
yeah, Michelle, come on.
Michelle Lubert, Housatonic. Just before the meeting, Jenny Clark and we were having a conversation. And Jenny explained that there's an issue in Housatonic with the water stations. Because of our superior Housatonic water, there has to be filters. And they're not going to, these filters will not work correctly, from what I understand, if the water station's outside. So they have to find a place to locate the water station, or at least the filter part of it, inside. That has not been done yet. I tend to agree a little bit. I'm a little nervous too, because the last thing I want to see is Housatonic left in the dust on anything, whether it's water bottle ban or anything. Joe, you live in Housatonic. There were voters at annual town meeting from Housatonic who voted with this, thinking, yes, we're going to have a water station up in Housatonic, but I'm not all that confident with it. And I would like Jenny, with your permission, you would have to request, to explain what the issue is with the water stations in Housatonic, because I think people on camera and home in Housatonic need to know that.
I'm not ready to get into the details of that
Okay.
yet, but
Those details are important,
yes, I
Chair.
agree with you.
Yeah,
I'm just
they're
not
really
sure we're
important.
ready to do
And
those here yet.
I'm beginning to feel a little bit of cart before the horse too.
Well, that's
Can
the,
I back up and
yes, please.
bring everybody back to where we are? So town meeting passed this bylaw after the second and reinforced the passing of the first one at the second town meeting. What happens after a bylaw is passed is that then the select board and the town manager have a bylaw to come up with an implementation plan. It's now part of what the town has to do. We have to enforce the laws. It is pretty typical when a law is passed to then figure out, okay, how is this going to be done? What are the resources that are needed? What are the objectives? What are the regulations? What is the enforcement plan? That's when that thing starts. We obviously didn't put resources in to doing that type of plan in anticipation of potentially a law getting passed. That happens after a law is passed. So in terms of timing, I understand there's questions and they're valid ones, but that's not the way things actually work. This is the same framework that was done for other similar environmental regulations where the plastic bag bylaw was passed, and there was about a year and a half of getting everybody up to speed on the bylaw, working together with the grocery stores to figure out how this could work, reviewing the policy, reviewing the goals and objectives, and then determining how we can actually enforce it. With the plastic bags, we understood the objective was to raise awareness, to make people understand what the intent of that bylaw was, to the environmental goals, and we did a very big collaborative advertisement campaign with the grocery stores, and they got a lot of recognition for it. The grocery stores were able to be seen as leaders in the environmental area and got quite a lot of accolades for that. Not to say that it wasn't difficult and it had a learning curve, and there's still people who go and they have to learn and adapt to it. But our job is to respond to what was voted at town meeting. The same type of thing is happening with this bottle ban. There are areas that have been identified with our Department of Public Works about where water filling stations will be located. Those will be determined by the Department of Public Works. There are groups and advocacy groups that are working to present and propose different scenarios and come up with funding, and they will be considered. But we will also be working with the grocery stores, with the Chamber of Commerce, and others to pull together how we can actually work this together to meet for all. We're not working with just one constituent group in this process. And these type of things are successful if people are on a board with the goals and objectives of the bylaw. This was presented by a group who very much cared about the environment and saw Great Barrington as being able to be a leader in this area. We've been a leader on environmental issues that have taken off and gotten adapted all across the country, and that's a tradition that Great Barrington has here. So in that same nature, this type of environmental initiative has come up. And we have a chance to make a difference. So we will continue and work similarly with the others to get the awareness out there. These type of things are best done when people are aware and are educated about it. We're not going to solve plastic problem just by small Great Barrington. We're not gonna make some enormous dent in that, what is that thing called in the ocean, the whole, like, that area, the area where it is, but we're gonna certainly get it noticed that this can make a difference, and we can make a small difference in our small town. So those are the directions of town meeting. It was tested at town meeting, it was pretty clear. We're here to implement the bylaws, and so that's the plan. In terms of the money, we'll look at what was donated, and then in terms of what's needed for it, we'll establish the prices for the water filling stations, and if that doesn't work all the way for every location in terms of the budget, we'll have to make some adaptations. And no one is gonna cut out Housatonic. I mean, I live in Housatonic, so I certainly have my own self-interest in line with that, and that's not at all part of the plan. So, there'll be more to this. We're gonna start the budget process. We'll figure out the numbers together, but the schedule for outlaying it was a pretty extensive education and awareness campaign. This can be best. The enforcement plan on this was frankly to not put an enormous amount of resources into the ticketing and the enforcement. For plastic bags, we got compliance because people came on board, recognized it was an important thing for the town, recognized that that's what the people in town meeting voted for and wanted. And similarly, I think that people will understand that town meeting voted for the bottle ban and will come on board. I don't really feel like putting a ton of more resources to start ticketing grocery stores for selling bottles. That's not the point. The point is to come together. So the longer we have an education plan and people raise awareness of the issues, the enforcement then is much simpler. We might have something here or there, or a reminder down the road, but we don't have a ton of enforcement resources. So that's the plan. That's what we propose, and the select board has to establish support for a schedule and for how this can be done.
May I add something?
Sorry,
Please,
a little
for the
long, but
microphone.
I'm,
No, that was good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for that explanation. That's really helpful. I want to my name's Jennifer Clark, and I was on the committee that originated this and had it passed twice at town meeting. I just want to make a clarification here that we chose water because it is a replaceable item. We have excellent tap water here in this town. And there are now, this is a two-pronged effort. Not only are we going to have water stations around town and in Housatonic, but there are 22 merchants or restaurants, cafes that have volunteered to say that once they put this decal in their window, they will be a GB on tap merchant, and that means they will officially welcome anyone into the store, and they will refill their water bottle, their refillable water bottle, right there. And these companies consist of the Berkshire Co-op, the Berkshire Bike and Board, Berkshire Mountain Bakery, Berkshire South Community Center, Berkshire Veneer, the Chef's Shop, Domaines Liquors, Extra Special Teas, Fuel Coffee Shop, Guido's Fresh Marketplace, Lauren Clark Fine Art, Lifeworks Studio, Michelle's Beauty Spa, Number 10, right here, the Prairie Whale, Ruby's Coffee and Sandwiches, Soko Creamery, Tangier Cafe, Tom's Toys, Ward's Nursery, and Windy Hill Farm. So there is going to be a lot of opportunity, and in fact the two public stations are really almost a, they're going to be there, but there's so much more opportunity to get water. And the water, in most cases, will be free at all of these places. In fact, I think it will always be. 4 or 5 of them are putting in their own dispensers so that people will see it's readily available once you walk in the store. In some cases, you'll ask a barmaid, or you'll ask behind the desk, or the receptionist, or the person manning the store. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity to fill your water bottle. And having a water bottle on hand is really the goal of this, is to encourage people to change their habit of not, enough said. So thank you for your time, and I hope that you will support this. And thanks so much for that great presentation.
So there's two parts of the select board here. There's education and then there's the enforcement. And education obviously is going ahead. I'd like to see us do something with the enforcement date so it's not hanging over everyone's head when I think there's much work to be done before the enforcement.
You want to put the dates up there before? And I believe that maybe it wasn't so clear, but I believe we did put that as we intended, so that I can't see it as well.
Oh, the 2020 was on purpose and not an accident.
Okay, because the
Yes,
bylaws,
correct.
the amendment to at the town meeting was 2019.
Right, that's when the law is in effect.
No, the law goes into effect January 1st, and enforcement will begin May 1st, 2019, was what was voted on at the town meeting.
Right.
Okay.
However, what we're proposing is to do an educational campaign
Right.
prior to the enforcement. So we're establishing regulations to implement this, and so we wouldn't start ticketing at that date. We would do an extensive outreach and communications and education initiative. We would concurrently have the plans to do the water filling stations, the flyers, and the maps, so that by the time a enforcement agent is assigned, the hopes is that everybody is well versed on the law, on what to expect, and then will easily comply, and then the enforcement needs in terms of putting staff out there to ticket would be extremely minimal.
So what are those two dates, the March 1st and the April 1st? What happens on those two dates? I forgot.
Assuming that, we were looking at the May 1st date, those would be notifications for businesses, just to let them know that this is coming. So we would have a 2-month warning and then a 1-month warning.
Okay, I'm
In
confused
terms
about the
of
dates then.
2019.
Yes.
Then those should be 2019, not 2020?
2019. But the last date is still May 20th for enforcement. No?
It's the year that everybody seems
Right.
to
I
be.
don't know why
I'm
you're
not-
confused.
Because it says 2020, and what
Right.
was voted on at the town meeting was 2019.
2019.
So
2019.
the town meeting, we're not ready to enforce this in May.
Okay.
In terms of, I'm sorry, now I'm getting all
Okay,
mixed up.
so-
I was very clear a second ago.
Okay, no,
but
I think,
I've
okay,
now
I
gotten
understand what you're
confused.
saying, I'm just
Right.
not sure we're all parroting it
Right.
correctly. So, on March, this May, or starting as soon as we print things up, you'll start notifying businesses
Correct.
doing public education. A
It's still-
year from this March 1st, you'll
Mhm.
start giving warnings and
Correct.
more information.
Right.
A year from April 1st, ticketing will begin.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
Is that
2020?
We are talking
2020, that's,
Mhm.
right?
That's,
We have a 1-year period of time.
It's similar to the time frame
It's
that
the
was the
same-
bat plastic.
Exactly.
Bags.
Right. The
Yeah.
bylaw was passed, the law went into place, and you have a period of time to get everybody on board, to do education, to get the infrastructure up. You give out notifications that there's gonna be, okay, our educational, period of grace period time is now concluded. We've done a lot of outreach, and everybody is aware, and then at that point, you send out notifications and saying, okay, now, if you're violating it, we'll start the ticketing.
just your name.
Diane Tracy, owner of Gorman Norton. Sell a lot of water. Please make this really clear for me, because my understanding was I couldn't have these bottles in my store as of May 1. Now of 2019. Now we're saying, what are we doing? Like, I'm sorry, I'm not getting this, and I
It's
don't
not
want to.
It's not you,
It's not you.
we're all a little confused.
Okay.
It was actually January 1st. but
Right,
the
which I
enforcement
understand that. May,
began
right.
The town manager is suggesting that we take it a full year before we do actual enforcement.
Okay, so now we're looking at 2020, May 1?
That's what the
It
suggestion.
doesn't mean that the law is not in place.
Right, the law's in
but I am
place.
just
Right.
not putting
Right.
staff out to ticket until the full educational aspect of it is
But
done.
someone comes into my store on May 2nd, I get ticketed.
Not this coming May.
Not May second
No.
of 2019,
Well, it
May
depends on
second
what
of
they decide.
2020.
So you can
Right.
sell your
Why
water for
doesn't the
another
board-
year,
Right,
Why
at
doesn't the
least,
board
assuming that it
figure
doesn't
out
go
what
over.
Yeah, okay,
you
so-
wanna
that's the
do?
proposal.
That's, so what my concerns are, and Diane, you'll hear this, before we do any enforcement, I wanna make sure there's a plan in place for implementation and funding for the water filling stations, for long-term costs and maintenance, who's responsible for those and what those costs are, and that there's a water filling station in Housatonic. I wanna make sure all that's in place before we do anything. So whether,
Before we do.
before we do any enforcement whatsoever. We can do education, but everything else is, as far as I'm concerned, is suspended. I don't even want, as far as I'm concerned, the date of May 1st, 2020 isn't even realistic till I see all the money that's brought in, because it was said that it's gonna be done through donations. So every water filling station, there is no town money that's going into this. So if that money isn't collected, I'm not saying it's not going to be, then the town has to make a decision at a town meeting whether they wanna pay for it.
Well, I think in the budget process, we have the estimates for how much it costs, and you'll be able to see the financial aspect of it.
When it was voted on, it was all gonna be by donation. So I don't see where that's changed.
Okay, but that's,
I'll
you may be
I'll agree with
one.
that, yeah, no, it was,
I may not be one.
no, it was,
Well, I mean, I
it was,
don't
it
know
was,
how
it was
the board feels.
suggested that there not be town funds provided for this. And I'm not gonna back it I won't back it in budget and I won't back it here if there's gonna be town funds supporting this, so. But we can
Okay.
discuss that.
Yeah, let me see if I can do
And,
this.
and, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
and again, just as a Housatonic resident, I'll reiterate, I'm not satisfied with anything unless there's a foolproof way that you can provide clean water during any kind of flushing or whatever Housatonic water system does, cause, I mean, I filter my water in Housatonic anyway, and I drink it when it's an odd color anyway, but I don't want other people to have to do that. So it needs to be, you talk about great water, no, we don't have great water, sorry, we don't, so.
If,
Paul, please, please.
if you could say that again, I can turn it into a motion,
So,
and then we can discuss it.
so I wanna make sure that,
It should be.
simple as, one is that Housatonic is included in the plan for water filling stations, that we have an implementation and funding plan for the water filling stations using private funds, and that we know and understand the long-term cost for maintenance of the water filling station, and the payment plan, who's going to pay for it.
And with these dates that Jennifer has suggested,
Uh,
assuming all those things are in place.
I don't disagree with Jennifer that those dates are okay. I'm
Right.
not disagreeing at all that we need to put it off a year, but I don't even wanna see us use those dates if we don't have all that in place.
Right, so that's my motion.
So do you wanna
Second.
keep those dates as a
Those-
framework and then?
yes.
and
Yes,
then
it's fine as a
Right.
framework. If we don't
Yes.
meet it though, those dates aren't gonna occur. I mean,
Isn't
Yes.
that how all of it works? I mean, that seems like everything else we
Yeah, and-
do, we have a date, and if we don't,
Ultimately, any costs associated with this go to town meeting again with the budget.
Yeah.
They go through us and then to town meeting.
right, but, so do I have a second on that before we do?
I
Did you, okay, cause my point is that, and I'm not saying this isn't gonna happen, but the water filling stations, my understanding at town meeting, we're gonna be private donations, I'm sure they will be. And we just need to see that before we move ahead with it, that's all I'm saying. If we don't see it, the money's not in hand, then we have a problem to start with, because it's not in the budget, maybe in the budget starting tomorrow night, whether we approve that or not, but that's not what I understood at the town meeting.
So to complicate matters, if it doesn't get past our budget process, it doesn't end up in town meeting, this won't take effect, effectively next year, because it'd be out of budget cycle. You'd have to wait a whole another year.
Yes.
So in other words, in the next month, if your group does not come to us with your financial plan, it's basically,
No, because if they come to us 6 months from now with the money,
It's just if we have to put any money
well,
in, we need to
that's
know
what I'm
now.
saying,
Yeah,
right?
that's what
They,
you're
they,
saying.
have- that's, yes.
yeah, so
Yes.
I'm taking that on the word, and I think they understand that, Jenny's shaking her head, I'm sure she understands, and that's, so we have a motion and a second, any other discussion on that?
Can I just ask one more question?
just go right to the
I'm confused.
microphone.
January 1st, I went over to Big Y, and they took all their water bottles off.
They met the spirit of the law.
Okay. Then, they're back again. They were told, they're back again. They're told that they can sell Poland Spring and their brand in the 30-pack or the 24-pack, but none of the smaller bottles. So when you go in there, that's all that's there is the big jugs and their water and Poland Spring water, which they're still selling. So I'm a little confused. I don't consider myself a dummy, but, so if you're saying that, what I want to know is, can Tracy's, can Big Y put those smaller bottles back out? Can they put all their water back out? Because this technically is not going to go into effect on May 1st.
Let me see if I can answer that. And you're right. I
I'm
understand.
totally baffled.
The ban started January 1st. We are doing no enforcement on it. So in the spirit of the ban, if you didn't want to sell water bottles and you felt that you wanted to follow the ban, yes, January 1st was the date. We are not going, no one's going to come in and hand Diane a summons and says she can't be selling those waters. No one's going to say anything from the town until we have all this information in place.
So if all that information isn't in place until May 1st,
Of 2020.
no, I'm talking May 1st of 2019.
Then
This
we
is
won't be
when-
enforcing it.
This is when this was supposed to be.
Right, then we will not be
So if it's
enforcing it.
not enforcing it, can they still sell the water?
I mean, the law is the law, so just as you go up to a stop sign and you stop, regardless of whether the police officer is there to ticket you or not if you don't proceed. So it was a bylaw.
I understand that, but the bylaw, the law that was voted on was it goes into effect January 1st,
Which you did.
and fines begin May 1st.
Right, so we're,
That was where it stood. They didn't have everything. You're sitting there smiling at me, and you almost avoided the fact that you emailed me. So my question is, that's what was voted on and passed
They said
at the
enforcement,
meetings.
enforcement, just for the right.
Enforcement, May 1st.
In my mind, enforcement at that time was not gonna be tickets, it was gonna be warnings anyways. There was no definition of enforcement.
Whether or not we had water stations or who's paying for what or anything.
But the select board
that's
right now are
just-
saying it's premature to start an enforcement. And the town manager's agreeing with that, and it is, as Steve said, is her decision, but we're all agreeing that it's premature to have an enforcement.
so at this point, what we're saying is enforcement will start a year from April. Enforcement is in ticketing, assuming
A year from
some,
A year from May.
No.
I didn't see that date out there, okay.
Okay.
Oh, I see what, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't need to be more confusing. Enforcement will start, ticketing and enforcement will start a year from May, assuming the water stations are in place, there's, whatever else he
A
listed.
funding plan.
There's a funding
So
plan.
if that's not in place by May 1st,
Then.
We won't do enforcement.
We'll take it up again, but this, that's not this
The
May.
law will still continue to be in place, but enforcement will continue to not happen.
I don't see how you can enforce something if nothing's in place.
Well, that's
Right.
why we're not
That's
enforcing
why we
it.
wouldn't be enforcing.
That's why we're not enforcing it.
Hi, I'm Wendy Kleinman. I'm on the Environment Committee, and I'm confused.
Okay?
My understanding was that the law goes into effect, has been gone into effect January
correct.
1, 2019. Sorry. And that as of May 1, 2019, that is when it goes into effect. There's one thing that's confusing me. It almost sounds like, well, it really is the law, but you're really not going to be, ticketed for it. So it's almost like condoning it. It's almost like you can do whatever you want until 2020.
Well,
So
because
I
of-
don't understand where the leeway is between the law.
Because
And
the voters who passed the law were
Right.
told a certain number of things would be in place.
And they're not. They're not yet in place.
So the voters who voted for the law voted knowing there'd be water stations, knowing there's a big way to pay for this,
It was,
and
it
none of that's here
wasn't
yet.
presented ever that it was in place. It was presented as this is what we're working towards, which we are. I just want you to know that I myself have put in money, and I'm not a wealthy person, for Housatonic. I put in $2,000. because I believe in this, and I feel that Housatonic should have water. And if they can get a filtered system, that would be great. But in the meantime, we have merchants that are going to be providing water. Nobody is going to be dying of water.
Right, but all of this was part of the plan that was presented.
Yes, this is all
And
part of
we're,
it.
and we're just waiting to enforce it
Right.
until the whole
But
plan
it's
is.
almost like saying, there's a stop sign. If you go through it, it's okay.
We're not condoning anything, we're just
Okay.
not enforcing it,
Okay,
we're just
but
making
you
that very clear.
understand it's confusing.
Well, it's because everything is not in place.
Not everything.
No.
This is a process.
Right,
And an educational process.
And we're waiting till the
this I
process is
support.
complete.
Right.
yep.
I
Okay.
just don't want it to be misconstrued that it's, the law is the law.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. So Jennifer, the only thing I will ask is if you come back to us at some point with more on the educational. And also, at some point,
Thank you, Joe.
obviously, we need to hear about how much money's in place, et cetera. And- Okay, moving ahead.
What, there's more?
Endorse Representative Smitty Pignatelli's proposal to reform the Chapter 90 funding formula.
Can I just make a motion to do that?
Yes.